Welcome to A Magical Life, Health, Wealth and Weight Loss. I'm your host, Magic Barclay, lead practitioner at Holistic Natural Health Australia and #1 best-selling author. In this podcast, I aim to give you practical tips on how to accelerate and sustain your health, increase your financial, spiritual and emotional wealth, and to look at something that haunts many of us needlessly, weight loss. In some episodes, I'll have guests available to give you even more tips, but in others, the floor is yours. Drop us a line at A Magical Life Podcast on Facebook and let me know what you would like to know more about. Now, sit back and enjoy, because it is time for you to create and truly discover a magical life. Welcome back to A Magical Life. I'm your host, Magic Barclay, and today I am joined by Dave Frost. David E. Frost is an NFPT, Certified Master Fitness Trainer, rowing coach and award-winning adjunct professor. He founded and leads Well Past 40 LLC to actively promote both wellness and fitness for athletes of all ages and abilities. He specialises in nutrition, endurance and strength training for people who deal with cancer, MS, PD, CP, diabetes and metabolic syndrome. Dave is a non-profit executive and volunteer for America Rows. You can learn more about his KABOOMER life's work at wellpast40.com. Welcome, Dave.
Magic, thank you so very much for reaching across the pond and chatting with me. I'm looking forward to it.
My absolute pleasure. Now, tell us about that certification.
In the States, the idea of helping other people in situations where movement is involved, of course, after doctors' releases, what we call, the Canadians came up with a wonderful form called Physical Aptitude Readiness Questionnaire. When our medical professionals give our clients releases, they're entrusted to folks like me who have gone through the training to make sure that we're safe, number one. Number two, we're not going to push clients too hard. But number three, offer a little tough love if that's what folks need to reach their health span goals. And I'll stress health span goals, not life. We want people to live longer and live better. And the credentials that I received from a couple agencies like NFPT hope to ensure our clients that they're getting somebody that isn't fresh caught from, a pay your fees online and get a credential. Just kidding. But yeah, it's not terribly arduous, but you learn all about the body. It gives you a good chance to learn about yourself and understand the capabilities and capacities of any athlete. And I stress that anyone who can move, get up from a chair, or adapt if someone does have some physical disabilities, that person is an athlete. And we want to make sure that athlete is tuned, gets tune-ups, and again, reaches for health span goals.
I love that. That's fantastic. Such a great synopsis there of being healthful and having health goals, not just like a time limit on your life.
Thank you for sharing that thought, that aspect of it, because there was a comedian named George Burns. God bless him. He smoked a cigar every day and lived to be a centenarian, which, is a goal of some of us as long as those years are good years. But the guy laughed a lot and he shared his thoughts. And one of the amazing thoughts that comedian George Burns said, "We have to get older. We don't have to get old." And there's a big difference between older and old. And folks like you with your magical life, and hopefully folks like me, one athlete at a time, we're trying to help them embrace aging, but not age.
Very true. Now, I'm looking at your bio here, and it says here that you were a pudgy kid from Vermont who turned into a Masters World Champion in rowing. How did you do that?
Golly, I was blessed to have mentors, trainers, and coaches. I became a Boy Scout And when I realized I couldn't do a pull-up and some of my skinnier friends could, that I better try to get with it. So started out, and as often the first steps can be the toughest, but I made it to where I could do push-ups and pull-ups as a kiddo. Still pretty pudgy, but I went to a service academy called the U.S. Naval Academy, and there is kind of like the transformation of the caterpillar to the butterfly, if you will. The phoenix moment of boot camp helped me refine and grow and realize how important the mind was to making the body do things that you didn't think you were capable of. So in fact, in the book I wrote, I attribute a lot of where I am today to my college rowing coach, a fine gentleman, Marine from the Korean War, Carl Ulrich, and his 30 caliber eyes and his trust in me meant a lot. So somebody believed in me, and I learned how to believe in myself. And I had some luck, but as Tom Hanks, another actor, mentioned, you have to do the work. There's no Madison Avenue cure-all that I'm aware of. There's no fountain of youth. If there is, I wish someone would tell me. Maybe you folks know in magical lives. But I believe doing the work is a real key. Stay the course and be confident that you can do amazing things. Give yourself time, have confidence in yourself, give yourself affirmations, sweat, laugh, be kid-like, and do the work.
Thanks for that. Now, look, many of our listeners are probably sitting wherever they are, their car or their office or at home, wherever they're listening today, and they're probably thinking, well, that's all good for Dave, but I have had an injury and now everything is different. I see that you also had an injury. And can you tell us about that and about how you recovered from it?
Well, yes, I did. And I believe I'm what we call Medicare age in the States. So I am, if you will, a ward of the state. The government says that I'm Medicare aged. And I'm happy to be here, what I call my encore years, to enjoy the felicities of age. But in 2001, I had a pretty severe herniated disc in a bad place. That herniation caused, for me, pretty excruciating pain. And my left calf was actually losing strength and dimension due to the loss of nerve signal from this herniated L5S1 disc. So after trying all the normal things that modern medicine can do for us, epidurals, traction, physical therapy, we pulled the plug, and I had rather notable surgery to fuse my spine at the age of 49 and go through the recovery. And that Phoenix-like moment of learning that bad things happen, what I call to good people, if I consider myself a good person, Magic, but that you can persevere. And yes, there's luck. But again, being knowledgeable and just not giving in, not throwing in the towel to physical injuries, I believe is, for most people, not all people. I mean, there's some devastating things to happen to our servicemen and women. There are people that get involved in, unfortunately, in accidents. That's why we call them accidents. But for many of us that face bone breaks, that face herniated discs, that face medical afflictions, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, I have never seen a credible, reliable research study that said that motion was bad for you. And in many cases, a theme that sounds simple yet hard: motion is medicine. I've worked with spinal injured athletes. I've worked with amputees. I've worked with people with Parkinson's and so on, and I see the joy in their faces when they can do something that they didn't think they could do. So I would say that certainly there are cases, Magic, where it's really a tough situation, and maybe what I just shared with your listeners and you may not fit them. But I believe for many of us, willpower and perseverance and grit can make a difference for many of us. Not all of us probably, but many of us. So yes, I face my own challenges, but I'm sure many of your listeners have too. And if take a deep breath, get through that rehab, the rehabilitation steps that our biopharmaceutical industry lets us appreciate, but then get moving as best you can. Maybe you can do it on your own. Maybe you would seek the advice of a friend, a buddy, a workout buddy. Maybe your healthcare system would provide someone to help you. Or maybe you would perhaps seek a personal trainer that is credentialed to help you out. But yes, many of us, perhaps not all of us, but many of us can indeed bounce back. The rope-a-dope, get off the ropes and say why not instead of asking why.
I love that. That is so true. Now, Dave, I ask the same 3 questions of each of my guests, and everyone gives me a different answer. And in looking at the information you've sent back to me, I can't wait for your answers to these questions.
Neither can I.
So here we go with number 1. What can your expertise do to accelerate health, be it emotional, spiritual, or physical?
Another simple yet hard one, a magic, take the first step. Grab a towel, grab a water bottle that doesn't have that BPA toxin in it, and start sweating as best you can, either on your own or with the help of a buddy or a personal trainer. Start moving. To accelerate means you have to have motion. Some things are faster than others. In the model that I use, Magic, I have 7 parts to wellness and fitness for this health span that I mentioned earlier. Strength, stability, stamina, stretching. Never forget the importance of clean, anti-inflammatory eating. Restorative sleep, I call it mimicking Morpheus, which, by the way, Morpheus comes from the same word as morphine. So your sleep can actually give you wonderful chemicals, just like exercise does, to hopefully be able to take steps 2 at a time instead of pills 2 at a time. And stress not. It's hard to say to folks, don't stress in today's lives because there's a lot going on. We have data, we have information. Sometimes there's knowledge that's very bothersome. And yet we can control a lot of our own self-induced stress by breathing, by exercising, by sleeping, by laughing and hugging. And those are things that really accelerate one's ability to have a vital health span. Maybe longer years too, but I'm talking about vital years where you can play with the grandkids, get up from the ground without using your hands like we used to do as kids, and so on. So acceleration is much easier for 2 of those elements, being stretching and stability elements, than it is for stamina. To have a notable increase in stamina can take many months. But again, if you're not moving in the first place, acceleration is a null equation. So you have to get moving. You have to push stuff and pull stuff and twist stuff to have strength training to avoid a dreaded term called sarcopenia, or loss of flesh. Each of us, unless there's an Adonis that I don't know about or an Amazon that I don't know about, we start to lose skeletal muscle after the age of 30 if we don't move stuff. So, but it takes time. It takes 8 to 12 weeks to get better at strength capability. Stamina takes the longest, but to accelerate, take those first steps and do the low-hanging fruit of stretching and stability, which, by the way, when somebody gets to my age, the encore years of my life, they're more important. We want to avoid falling, and we want to be limber. We want our joints to move to be able to play with the grandkids and get down on the ground. First steps.
Fantastic. Love that. Now, what are your top 3 tips to create wealth? When we're talking wealth, we talk personal, financial, emotional. There's a whole gamut of wealth factors. So what are your top 3 tips, Dave?
My top 3 tips are for folks to remember that there is a physical banking account which you should be investing in. We had a wonderful blues singer whose nickname was Muddy Waters. And Muddy Waters sang that you can't take out what you don't put in, meaning like a retirement account or whatever. So not to play with the Queen's English, but I say a physical banking account, a portfolio of what you've invested in strength, stability, stamina, stretching, restorative sleep, clean eating, and stressing not will give you livelihood that could be personal, financial, and emotional. And what's the tie into financial? Well, if you live longer and live better, you'll take less pills. Maybe your healthcare costs go down, and maybe you're less of a burden to your kin, your first responders in the family, so that you do stay vital into your 90s. In fact, thriving and striving into your 90s is something to which I aspire. I joke that I want to prove our Social Security Administration something wrong. Our Social Security Administration says, Dave, statistics are that you're going to be dead at 85. And I say back to Mr. and Mrs. Social Security, you might be right, but I'm going to try to prove you wrong. So 3 tips. Know that your physical banking is a part of your overall portfolio for those golden years, for those what I call the encore years. Number 2, as I shared from Muddy Waters, you can't withdraw what you don't put in. There's no cash reserve in Vitality, so you have to invest in it. And number 3, I would say that, emotional mind and body connection. We have a degree program in America called Masters of Business Administration, or MBA. I call MBA mind body alignment. Lots of times we can get our bodies to do amazing things if our mind is rested, if it doesn't have brain fog, if it is stimulated with oxygen and sugar, which is what it feeds on to do its amazing computing jobs, to generate those thousands of wonderful chemicals floating around our bodies. So appreciate and celebrate the mind-body alignment. Isn't it funny that humming a lot is wonderful for the vagus nerve? We joke what goes on in Vegas stays in Vegas, but this is VAGUS, not Las Vegas. But humming is a way to stimulate one of our cranial nerves, which connects our mind and our gut, which is so critical to health span and livelihood. So MBA, appreciate your physical bank account, and just know, as Muddy Waters said, you can't take out what you don't put in.
So true. And I'm so glad you mentioned the vagus nerve. We've spoken about it on this podcast several times. And myself, as an innate immunity practitioner, we work with the vagus nerve. And so, folks, it's not just humming, it's also singing, it's swallowing. So the more you sip on your water rather than guzzle your water, you are actually stimulating your vagus nerve. It's also chewing. So chewing each mouthful rather than just bolting that food down. By chewing each mouthful, you're stimulating your vagus nerve. And what happens in Vegas never stays in Vegas, because if your vagus nerve is not happy, being one of the 12 cranial nerves, none of the others are going to be either. So, just really love your Vegas and let it love you back.
Wow. Thank you. That's about the closest thing to magic I can imagine. How simple yet hard is it to hum, to laugh, to chew slowly, to eat deliberately, to eat to live rather than live to eat. Boy, those were super. Thank you.
No, thank you. I'm so glad you brought it up. So you talk about knowing that you can live beyond 85. So is there a calculator or something that people can look at to know if they could get to, say, 100?
There are several. So yes, absolutely. And I would encourage folks, unless you're ones that are not comfortable going online, Dr. Thomas Pearls, Thomas, Thomas, and Pearls, Perls, developed a calculator, which is free, don't pay anything, but just learn the factors that can contribute to your health span and your livelihood. It could be as simple as flossing your teeth, or taking a baby aspirin, or moderating caffeine, certainly moderating alcohol. But it's amazing in this very valid, this credible, reliable, what we call CRAAP tested, CRAAP tested calculator by Dr. Thomas Pearls. And I'll give the website address, Magic. It's livingto100.com/calculator. And that 100 is the numbers 100. So it's livingto100.com/calculator. Takes only a few minutes. There's some others. The Norwegians have a marvelous calculator based on your vital oxygen, how much your lungs hold, how quickly you can expel oxygen, which is what our doctors often test, even if you don't have pneumonia. Those are good things to know. But the Norwegians also have a international model, and I don't have the web link for that. But we do know that oxygen is life. And Norwegians are pretty fit people. Hey, it's a country of 4 million people that wins a whole lot more medals in the Winter Olympics than America does. So I think they have pretty vital lungs. So I'd listen to what the Norwegians say about lung capacity. So those are two. Perhaps insurance companies also offer livelihood or lifestyle calculators. But I stop strangers to say that Dr. Thomas Pearls has a real pearl, pardon the attempt at humor there, with this Living to 100 calculator. You may find things that are, geez, I can do that. And like floss your teeth. Isn't that amazing that something like that can add, if not years to your life, months to your lives, just by healthy habits of trying to keep bacteria from getting into your bloodstream. So livingto100.com/calculator. And that would be wonderful if your listeners checked it out and see if I'm full of smoke or whether there's something there. I say there's something there.
Thank you. Now, before we go on with our questions, we've been skirting around this at the start of this podcast, but you're an author. Can you tell us about your book?
I am an independent author of a newbie. I'm a freshman. I hope to be a sophomore, coming up with a book called Strong to Save. I think you've heard my emphatic pleas for people to stay vital in moving and pushing and pulling stuff, because resistance training is one of the finest medicines that you can do. But my first book is called KABOOMER, and it kind of came about with this personal setback of mine, this spinal fusion, which I said, holy smokes, I have a calf that isn't the same size as my other calf. I found out that my core muscle groups were not enough to keep me from spinal damage, and I better get going here. So I'm one of those folks, Magic, that maybe tries to share with you how the watch works instead of telling you what time it is. So I dug into the research, and what I found was that a kind of a diary, an experiential almanac of my own journey, which is science-backed and sweat-based, might indeed help other people on their journeys. My model is, everyone that writes a book about fitness and wellness probably has a model, but you've already heard mine. It's strength, stability, stamina, stretching, clean eating, restorative sleep, and stressing not. But how can I give you enough details, not a mile wide and an inch deep, nor a mile deep and an inch wide? How can I try to find a conversation to inspire you folks to take the first step, to grab that water bottle and towel and move? So I wrote KABOOMER, Thriving and Striving into Your 90s, to try to get people to join the movement to prove the Social Security Administration wrong, that they indeed can thrive and strive into their 90s, or at least give it a good run. If something comes up, that happens. Life isn't fair. But for many of us, I say taking steps two at a time is a heck of a lot better than taking pills two at a time. And that's a problem in our country. I don't think it's unique to the United States. Polypharmacy, hey, drugs can keep people alive, but they're drugs that I advocate. Be skeptical and see if you can live without, with natural, holistic ways of dealing with pain or dealing with any number of conditions that you certainly work with. So that's why I wrote KABOOMER. I wanted to share my story. Just quick aside, I am in a lineage from a gentleman named Ralph Waldo Emerson, who was a pretty good guy. He talked about the felicities of age. And because I'm a descendant of him, some ask if I'm related to Robert Frost, and in the family of man, it's a far less direct tie-in than Ralph Waldo Emerson. So some say, Dave, maybe you had a book in you. Well, that's my book. I try to share my thoughts in audio, on Kindle, paperback, and hardback, so that maybe I could inspire some other people to prove their Social Security Administration to be incorrect.
I love that. So, Dave, we talk about weight loss here. Many people battle with it needlessly, and we know that a major issue with weight is stress. So if you have ever battled your weight, and you said you're a pudgy kid, what was the trigger to lose it, and what can you offer the listeners to reduce their stress?
I was blessed to have military service to try to turn some of those potential energy cells into kinetic energy and trim down. So I was blessed. I will share, and there's a great quote that floats around, "It's not your fault." Don't cause more stress by fretting over your body mass of white cells. There's a wonderful book, The Amazing Story of Fat, I believe it is, by Dr. Sylvia Tara. And it's not a long read, but it's her journey. It's a tiny little thing, but lived her whole life with what she considered to be obesity. And what she learned is just extraordinary. Fat is an organ. There are two types of fat: the brown fat that's healthy and helps us stay alive, but then the white fat that tends to gather around our midsections and visceral fat and so on. on. So it's a big deal. Many valid studies show that lean organisms tend to live longer. So I'm saying it's not what you weigh, because skeletal muscle is denser than white fat is. But I'm saying there are no Madison Avenue Fountain of Youth cure-alls. No matter what, I must get 25 helpful emails or text messages a day that says drink this and poop out 2 pounds of fat overnight. Well, trust me, I'm from Vermont, but we have a saying for folks from Missouri: trust but verify, that kind of thing. So we're learning a lot. In America, we spent 50 years shunning fat because our government said fat was evil. Well, I think most people now realize that fat is healthy as long as it's not hidden fat, that, things from the ground, not things from food processing, not trans fat, not poly this or whatever, but the wonderful extra virgin olive oil and those sorts of things are healthy fats. Diets, there's one theme that this layman, Dave Frost, says is a theme to any successful diet, be it DASH, Mediterranean diet, paleo, keto, low, simple sugar, appropriate levels of fat and protein on the macro scale. So I learned that protein was good. It increases your metabolism. It helps you build skeletal muscle. Those are good things. The more muscle you have, the higher your metabolism. I learned that fat is healthy, the right fats. Jack LaLanne, one of the leaders of fitness in America, who died at the age of 94, saying it's better to wear out than rust out, advocated healthy fat, but not simple sugars. If we don't move, if you're running a marathon, sure, you can eat anything before the race. You can carb load, you can have sugar, jelly beans, marshmallows, because you're going to burn it. But don't do it as a regular basis, because many of us don't have the insulin sensitivity to handle simple sugars that end up as white fat around our midsections. Long-winded answer, I learned you have to do the work. It is an energy equation for most of us, yet I will share it's not your fault. My family tends to be what we call mesomorphs or endomorphs. I have a fat family, unfortunately. It's in our genes, and they're just some things you cannot beat on themselves. And so I say, don't look back, look ahead. We're not asking you to become America's biggest loser. We're asking you to move and celebrate motion and a health span rather than just how much you weigh. One of the worst evils of all time is to believe it when the doctor says you have a high body mass indicator, BMI. It was a study. The father of big data, this Dr. Quetelet, used French conscripts and skinny Scottish prisoners to come up with a study of what body mass should be. He didn't include women. He didn't include people of all ages. And of course, we've evolved quite a bit in the last 170 years. So I say, if any doctor says anything about your BMI, hey, doc, measure my body fat. Measure my vital tissues like skeletal muscle. Much more important. So, pardon the long-winded diatribe there, but it is hard. You're not to take it personally if you were dealt the bad card, a fat gene, but what you eat in macros and plenty of water, how much you sleep, and when you eat, the timing of your eating can be essential. I'm sure many of your listeners and perhaps some of the folks with whom you work have tried intermittent fasting. Hey, that was our forebears. Our forebears grew up not knowing when the next gazelle was going to be caught for dinner. They had to learn how to fast. As a result, they were good fat burners. What have we gotten? Televisions, screen time, sitting. Those are things that are controllable, but they're hard. So let's become better fat burners. Let's try to do the things that increase our insulin sensitivity so that we're vital, so that we don't end up with adult diabetes, and so that we don't store that macro nutrient carbohydrate as white fat cells, which are evil.
Very much so. Well said. Now, let's talk stress. What are some really easy ways to combat chronic stress?
In a simple yet hard department, Magic, be grounded. Go barefoot. I know we're hustling, we're busy in COVID, out of COVID, but my goodness, go barefoot. Let your feet, tickle in the grass or the surf or the sand. Breathe. boy, it's not just in labor. And obviously a guy doesn't know a whole lot about childbirth, except perhaps being a coach and knowing that Kegels are good for guys too, but how you breathe. Again, vital lung capacity, how much your lungs can hold and how quickly you can expel air. There are a number of wonderful breathing techniques you can do. The simplest, I say, takes 1 minute. Inhale deeply for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 4 seconds, slowly exhale for 4 seconds. That doesn't sound like a lot of time, but try it. And then that's one cycle, do it 4 times. But that, you'll find your heart rate lowers. Honest to God, the number of times that I've done it, and it's a lot, my heart rate lowers almost immediately. Your body's amazing ability to do that oxygen and carbon dioxide thing by holding your breath is extraordinary. So mindful breathing, that's one of the great benefits of things like Qigong, and if I said that correctly, which I'm not a practitioner of, by the way, or yoga. Mindful breathing is such a big part of that. It's extraordinary what it can do to help your body chill. I joke, and because I'm a simple guy, I said that our forebears lived a 4F lifestyle: fight, flight, feed, and frolic. And I'm hoping that folks will frolic more, and you can take that wherever you want. But flight and fighting, yeah, it's good to generate cortisol and adrenaline from our amazing adrenal systems. If a great white is in the water there in Australia chasing you, that's a good time to have your adrenal glands generate these amazing compounds called hormones like cortisol. But the chronic drip, drip, drip is what kills people. And mindful breathing is the simple yet hard thing to deal with it. Exercise, sweat, to generate the right amount of cytokines, not from responding to a global pandemic virus, but responding to a little bit of inflammation that you cause from exercise is a great way to handle stress. And learning how to sleep. And by the way, I try to be a natural person. If you've tried everything naturally and can't sleep, that's my one exception for considering pharmaceutical prescription things. Restorative sleep to mimic Morpheus, in my opinion, is so critical, so vital, so precious that if you have to use pharmaceuticals to get it, get it. But unfortunately, a nightcap of a nice adult beverage is not a good way to do it. It might help you get to sleep, but it's also going to wake you up at 2 or 3 a.m. So if you think about the stressors, and yes, good Lord knows we have lots of stressors in life, breathe, go barefoot, hug, laugh, get that vagus nerve going, and sweat and sleep. Yeah, there's anti-inflammatory eating. Some things do kind of get your gut riled up, which can also contribute to chronic drip, drip, drip of cortisol growth. Let's not let it happen. Let's get the happy hormones from running. Isn't it amazing that we can generate our own heroin-like product, an endorphin, from getting enough sweat for long enough? I say natural heroin, not opioids.
I love that take on it. Now, we often like to offer freebies to our listeners here. We know that people always want to get started with something but might not know where the first step is. So what can you offer our listeners today?
You've heard Magic, and thank you for chatting about this. I say join the movement. See if you're committed to taking those 2 steps at a time, to be natural, to be vital, to be active, to increase your health span. So I say join the movement. If folks were to and think there's any credibility in this guy named David Frost, and who, by the way, did not interview Richard Nixon and was not knighted by Queen Elizabeth, that's the other David Frost. If somebody hears what I've shared and think there's merit, let's follow up. Send me an email. I do text messaging services to give little tips and tricks and hacks to you if I have your email address. But I try to send out regular inputs that I've learned, again, on my journey as I prepare for Strong to Save as my second book, to try to help people on their journeys. Let's prove our governments wrong. Let's live longer. Let's become a burden to our kids by living long and living well. So join the movement. Get in touch with this guy named Dave Frost. I am going to post, my good friend Lauren and Sarah have encouraged me to put together a mini pack of stretches, which I shared can provide pretty, not instant, but quite rapid improvements, and then strength, because we know the merits of resistance training. So hopefully within a week, we'll have a gratuitous step-by-step sharing of 5. There are many wonderful stretches, and there's infinite amount of great strength moves as well, but we'll have those to share. I have a list of at least 100 free resources, which I've gotten over the years on my own journey and my own research, that I can share as well. So the website is wellpast40.com, and folks can join the movement. They can learn about me. They can kick the tires and see if I might add value. I just want folks to live longer and live better in this thing called health span. Wear out, don't rust out. So the website is a good way to do it. Here we are talking across the pond, and you said you have listeners all over, which is great. So the electronic way of communications to perhaps help you take next steps is via the website.
That's great. Now, folks, you can find Dave on Facebook at facebook.com/wellpast40. You can also find him on Instagram at KABOOMER Coach. He's also on Twitter at DFP Trainer. You've heard his website, wellpast40.com. Thank you so much, Dave, for joining us. That has been so much great stuff. And if I can sum it all up, folks, take your shoes off, walk in the dirt, take a nice, deep, replenishing breath, drink some clean water, eat some great food, and have some fun.
Wonderful words. May I offer one more from this guy named Robert Frost? Consider it a freebie.
Please do.
He offered, don't devote too much of your life to one body part, that being your wishbone.
Exactly. Wishing ain't gonna make it so.
Amen.
Listeners, thank you so much for joining us today for episode 67. Thanks, Dave, for sharing all that amazing information. Now, in episode 68, we're talking all things innate immunity, and I'm going to have some terrific offers coming up for you all to learn more about what every one of our guests has been talking about, which is natural health. So today, thank you. Live well past 40. And for now, go forth and create your magical life. Thanks for listening today. Please subscribe to hear future episodes, leave a review, and share this podcast. You can follow us on Facebook at A Magical Life Podcast or at Holistic Natural Health Australia. That's holistic with a W. You can find us on Instagram at Holistic Natural Health or at www.holisticnaturalhealth.com.au. That's where you'll access all sorts of articles, freebies, and more.